I thank the member for Ryan. Are there any statements? And I call the member for Hotham.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. And I rise today to congratulate Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, who yesterday became the longest ever serving British monarch. I'm a Republican, Deputy Speaker, but I never want to overshadow how important the Queen is to the British and how important it is for people of my beliefs not to be glib or rude about the role of the monarchy. Queen Elizabeth is a public servant and she has lived her entire life in service to her country, and I respect that. Britain is a country that faces many challenges and, frankly, great division, Deputy Speaker. Queen Elizabeth has been a constant, a comfort, a fixture in a very fast-changing world for her people. Now, we're a very young democracy, Deputy Speaker, and today we acknowledge that the Queen has been our head of state for 63 years. That's more than half of our life as a federated nation. She's part of our history and she's always going to be so. But part of our history, Speaker, is where I believe the monarchy should remain. In 1952, when the Queen became our head of state, Australia was a completely different country. We were a monocultural nation where it was deemed perfectly acceptable that we determine our immigration policies based on people's race. New Australians, as they were called, were expected to quickly assimilate into our way of doing things. Our first Australians were at the time subject to an extraordinary range of discriminatory policies. And Deputy Speaker, in those days, a woman's place was in the home, and of all the people that had ever been elected to federal parliament, just 3 of them were women. Speaker, it was a nation where it made perfect sense that we thought of ourselves as being part of the British Empire. Menzies said that we were British to the bootstraps, and at the time, almost all Australians agreed with him, except, I would say, a ragtag group of radical Republicans, of which my grandfather was one. But as a smaller and younger democracy, things change here very quickly, Deputy Speaker, much faster than where our Queen lives, over 17,000 kilometres away. Today, I represent an electorate where most of the people that I represent come from migrant families. Almost half of my constituents were themselves born overseas. They come from more than 150 different countries and cultures around the world, and for most, Britain, the Queen, the monarchy have nothing to do with their fiercely Australian identity. And Speaker, the reason for this is very simple and very straightforward, and that is that the values that these incredible people I represent espouse as Australians have nothing to do with the values that are espoused by the monarchy. Deputy Speaker, the fundamental principle of the monarchy is that power should come from birthright. The monarchy is a sexist institution because the Queen would never have ever been the Queen had she had a brother who, just by virtue of being male, would have taken precedence over her right to the throne. Now, in recent years, we've done an incredibly modern thing and updated the laws of succession to allow the eldest child of the royal family to become the king or queen. But discrimination remains, Deputy Speaker, because when Charles becomes king, Camilla will become the Queen, but the husband of a future Queen will never be the king. And the reason for that is very simple. A king is always considered to be more powerful than a Queen simply because she is a woman. Now, Deputy Speaker, it doesn't stop there. To become a Member of Parliament, I'm not required to join or to be prevented from joining any religious group. Our Constitution declares that there should be no religious test to office, and all of us in this chamber would surely agree that the idea of this would be practically and fundamentally ridiculous. It's one of the most basic principles of a secular democracy. But for our head of state, the person that governs over our country, the opposite applies. Now, due to recent change, the head of state is, again in an amazing step forward, allowed to marry a Catholic, but they're forbidden from being a Catholic themselves. Now, within my electorate alone, Catholics make up the largest faith community. 35,000 people that I represent align themselves with that religion, yet that religion is seen by the rules of succession as being so threatening that it would rule any future monarch ineligible. Deputy Speaker, in Hotham there are almost as many Buddhists as there are Anglicans, and non-religious people outnumber Anglicans twofold. But with the recent changes allowing the monarch to marry a Catholic when they are crowned, they must still declare that they are a faithful Protestant and in communion with the Church of England. So I say, Deputy Speaker, that not only is our head of state unrepresentative of our nation, one of the most multicultural in the world, but that it actively discriminates against a large group of people by continuing to preference one religion over another and one gender over another. As Australians, Deputy Speaker, I believe that we simply cannot be the best version of ourselves until this fundamental building block of our political system is removed. Today, the foundations of our system don't merely fail to reflect who we are as Australians, they reflect values that are anathema to us as Australians, values of hereditary, of privilege, of discrimination and of exclusion. The notion that this institution is appropriate to provide over this incredible, multicultural, outward-looking country, one of the most peaceful, diverse democracies in the world, is wrong. We're big enough to stand on our own 2 feet and we'll be a lot better off for it. Australia is the complete opposite of everything the monarchy represents. We're young, strong, friendly, informal, we're kind, we're open. We find titles and pomp and ceremony amusing, something to poke a bit of fun of, not to revere at. We love our neighbours no matter what religion, what gender, what sexuality they are. That is what it is to be Australian. Our head of state should be one of us. It's really that simple. We're one Australian people from many different backgrounds, and what brings us together, unlike for the British, has nothing to do with someone who has visited our country just 16 times over their 60 years of reign over us as a people. I want to congratulate the Queen, I really do. She's devoted her life to her kingdom and she'll be forever part of our history as Australians. But I do not believe that she should form any part in our future.
I thank